Hi, welcome. If you have any questions, let me know. I am just logging on and tuning in. Today's topic is about emotions and codependency. So if something strikes you, actually, I had a question about this yesterday on a post that I think does need to be addressed because of how much, as far as emotions are concerned, codependency and repression go hand in hand. We repress and learn actually really bad coping skills as far as dealing with our emotions are concerned, because as you'll see through the list, there's something called emotional learning that we grow up around. And even if we're not demonstrating it in the very beginning of our lives and really figuring out ways to cope with emotional pain, doesn't mean that it doesn't come out later in life. So, I mean, if you're coming onto this and you're seeing this and you have an idea about, okay, this is something I'm struggling with, chime in. I love to see people also and be very interactive, since I will read your comments. I will try to answer your questions while still talking about this. This is not just a lecture. That would be super boring. I just use the screen in order to show you the slide, and you can follow along. And sometimes that also helps you to see what it is that we're talking about while you're scrolling through. So how's everybody doing? I'll start with that. I'm doing really well. My name is Bianca Grace. I lead the Emotional Warrior community. You can go onto my website if you want to see that. I'm a psychotherapist, but I'm also what I call a teacher of emotional development. And codependency is really my forte, because not only have I experienced it, but I have also worked through it in both within the clinical setting and within my own personal life, and understand vast amounts of this in every sense and shape. So I am trying to educate people on codependency as a way to really promote your own self-knowledge. You really need to understand what this is in you, and a lot of times it's completely unconscious. So hey Liz, thank you for chiming in. I had an alcoholic mother, I understand, in which codependency happened, and that slide sums it up. Right, doesn't it? And thank you for the follow, Ariel. But I have been working in therapy on this. Awesome. And thank you for sending the likes. You can double tap the screen and that'll help draw more in. That's how TikTok likes to do it. 1111, nice. What is the meaning of codependency? Well, Ariel, I think Liz, her description of what it was like. Codependency is formed, our minds are sponges. They are unformed, and then they become informed from the inside out by our environment, by our family, by especially interactions with our parents, and how they even act in front of us. But so codependency is I call it more of a mindset. I think it's a very large meta schema for how we relate to others. Due to, like Liz is saying, alcoholism, is a way that we have understood codependency on a couple levels. And actually, I have a masterclass on this. We talk about codependency in relationship to alcoholism because really, I depend on you, and you depend on me, and we're going to enable. You're going to be my enabler. In some ways, emotionally, children have to be there for their parents. So a lot of times children, obviously, this is why I'm saying it's unconscious. If your mother starts to use you for her emotional comfort and her emotional needs and her emotional container for her anger, absolutely, thank you. The child will learn to be that thing. And that means that the child becomes codependent very early. And actually, in order to get the mother's love and the mother's approval, we take up different types of coping skills to please her, to be there for her, not to argue, to make her life easier. And that is all about mom and not about us. So codependency in and of itself is what I call a personality style that is about others. We always are moving toward all about the external, all about the roles that we play, and never looking inward. Faceless. I love that. I love that, because here talking to the screen, I really am hopeful because I can't see your faces. Usually I can see if I'm nailing it by somebody's facial expression, and can shift how I'm saying things if so. So thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it. The idea here next is that if I've always been preoccupied with trying to keep everything calm and deal with all your alcoholism, all your narcissism, all your relationship problems and everything, and just try to keep everything fine, I don't ever have anybody helping me with the things that are listed up above, which are not only happening in response and reaction to our environment and our family, but also just within our own selves. Codependent children often are raised feeling like they're little adults, and their childhood wasn't really a childhood. It was like, I grew up really fast and taking care of a lot of people. So, or my family. I'll look at that, Magnum. I think that's an interesting way of putting that. But I want to say that the last point here is why I say this is because our emotional experience as a human being is not developed at the stages that it should be when we are young. And when I work with people, I notice that they feel like, well, I've dealt with that emotion with this coping skill. Well, with that coping skill, in childhood was adaptive, maybe a coping skill for anxiety or for shame or for guilt or for fear, like never saying no. Always saying yes helps me cope with guilt. Yeah, that's not going to work, right? When you are an adult. How you cope with things as a child is like in a vacuum, and you try to take it to your adult life, and what we find is codependent children didn't get the emotional development, the emotional education. They didn't learn how to deal with their emotions except for through coping mechanisms that don't work anymore. So this is where I'm saying we're in trouble a little bit as adults. We got quite a bit of work to do, and you know what, I did it too. So I definitely don't pretend to sit up here and say I studied this and this is that's how I know. Yes, I understand it through theory, but I will absolutely let you know that it is a micro-processing and it's a developmental process that we can go through as adults at a much faster rate than as kids. People are like, oh, I'm back there with my emotional development. Oh no. Like, no, don't sweat it. Really, we really need to look at each emotion almost, separate. I know it's not separate. We'll feel anxiety and shame, and sad all in the same kind of moment. But if we can learn how to deal with one emotion at a time, I really think that's, and understand it, we can start to what I call be in the behind the driver's seat, or be behind the wheel of our emotional life, because our emotions, when we don't know how to deal with them, totally steer us over into the ditch, and we end up just starting over. So psychotherapist, licensed, masters, all sorts of cool stuff, private practice. But I'm not doing private practice. I am actually moving completely into education now and have my emotional warrior community, so I can teach more than one person at a time. I think therapy, even though valuable, is antiquated when so many people want to heal. We just don't have enough therapists for that. How would I step away from that addiction? Fighead, I'm not quite sure what addiction if it's a relationship addiction or an actual alcohol addiction. Magnum, I don't know if you're still on with the question about, I think that's a little controversial, like why can women set up shop after they fail? I don't know about that. I think that women definitely struggle after leaving a relationship, even a divorce with children, to get on their feet and understand who they are, especially if they had codependency issues. Though I did talk to a man last night. Actually, I have coaching sessions on Tuesday. Since my membership program is brand new, I only had one guy show up, so he got a private session, and that session is now live on my membership. You are awesome. Congratulations, Leanne. That's beautiful. And he was a serial, and same with, I know quite a few women too. So the relationship has stages, and in the stage where it's not really working out anymore, a codependent person and a narcissistic person tend to do the same thing here. They'll find somebody else before they leave that partner. So a lot of times, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That's incredible. And you need to publicize that and reward yourself. And that's the thing, is that I think that's like set up shop. Guys can do that. Women can do that. If that's really what your shtick is, if you really are addicted to relationships, you really are fearful of being alone, it's very likely, if you don't deal with those, if you don't take some time after a relationship to really work on these things, you're going to fall right back into it, even if you took time and you didn't work on these things. But a lot of people do that. I don't think it's one or the other. But I think I also understand, what you meant by that. So going back, I want to talk about, and people can talk about this a little bit more too, is, anxiety and shame. If you go all the way back to the beginning, right? When you were born, you feel anxiety. There's crying, there's fear. And fear and anxiety is a signal. It's a signal that there's danger, either from outside or inside. If you're hungry, that feels painful. I'm crying. I don't know what that is. It's anxiety in its rawest form, its purest form, is absolutely supposed to protect us. And it is a crying and I'm anxious because I'm hungry, or I sense something's wrong around me and I feel uncomfortable. That's an expression of it when we're very young. But I really feel like if you can understand that anxiety is something that we need to become, I feel, more in touch with. Codependent people a lot of times have to deal with massive amounts of anxiety, and I call it like a pain threshold, where they actually they don't feel anxious when they should because of the lack of boundary. So anxiety in and of itself really needs to be, thought about. If a codependent person is engaging in high risk behaviors, is allowing themselves to be with somebody that's dangerous and doesn't sense that as anxiety, the signal of danger, then I absolutely feel that we have numbed ourselves out or put a barrier or boundary up to a natural process that's supposed to help us survive. And we need to deconstruct that boundary in order to get back to understanding that is supposed to be scary. I need to feel that urgency to move away from that situation. And I see that, how is it that I turned into my father when I'm afraid? I'm deathly afraid of that man. You can tell me a little bit more about I think that's really important, because as you see, as it all comes together, you're kind of going all the way to the bottom for me right here with this question, is that emotional learning is how. So not only are a part of us, really, not only are we are witnessing, we are observing our parents' behavior. That is imprinting. So like you can have PTSD from seeing a bad event, right? You can emotionally learn their behavior by being around it, or listening. You listen to negative talking and screaming or some sort of disrespectful, dysfunctional way of communicating. That's what you're learning. learning not in some way that is like, oh, that's interesting, but it's being impressed upon you. And now you don't have those situations that might trigger that in childhood, but when you become an adult, there comes the emotional learning that you again, accumulated from those experiences now is in your life. And thank you for the likes. If this resonates with you, definitely double tap. That's what starts to happen, is like, oh wow, I just yelled at that my step kid or my kid or whatever, like my mom yelled at me. I yelled at, I acted angry like my father. When you're an adult, you'll see that you have those those objects, are still in there, and they come out in experiences, and that should show you that instead of dealing with feelings in your own way, you haven't come up with that yet. The brain defaults to how it knows to deal with that situation, and that's what I say. It's a not you. I try to let people understand this is a not you formation, meaning that way of dealing with things you learned, but you could easily say that's not in alignment with really how you want to deal with things. So there are many parts of us, and this part is now dealing with anger, frustration, fear, anxiety, and shame like my parent did. Nope. I'm going to deal with it in these ways. And that's when you take control and start to develop your understanding of those feelings and why they're happening, and take that process over. Opinions about dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT. I think DBT is a really great exercise as far as, again, educating the public or people specifically if they have, there's two ways of looking at it. I use it as educational material for interpersonal communication. One of the things that codependency deprives us of is the ability to truly connect. We're actually very frightened of being vulnerable. We're very frightened of getting it wrong. We're frightened of people being mad at us. So, example of what? And so say a little bit more what you want an example of. And yes. Oh, good. And so before I go to DBT, just to finish that up, yes, my father yelled at his partners. Healthy emotional learning, right? Exactly. And I think there's a grieving process a little bit to see that that's in there, but that's not you. You just go ahead and say, I've got to quarantine. I've got to put a boundary up and say, okay, now it's my turn. This is how they dealt with anger. This is my turn to figure out how to, and this will go right into DBT, how to have an effective conversation when I'm feeling, conflicted about something. And good morning, son. I think in some ways, if you're able to go to my website and see, there's a free masterclass for effective communication strategies with your partner. You'll see, just like with DBT, we need to strategize ways of dealing with conflict with our partner. And I will say that with DBT specifically, what I like is it's frustration tolerance, it's understanding that emotions aren't going to overwhelm you, that you can think things through if you have strategies and you use I statements. Now, what I want to say is my criticism of this system is only this. It's not the system itself, it's that not enough people know it. So somebody can learn DBT and be like, oh, I'm so excited to use all these skills interpersonally. And they have another side that's more like mindfulness. And so it's things that you can just practice personally for emotional regulation. But I think that not enough people know how to talk in a way that's effective. We don't learn how to communicate with our partner. One of the most important people that we are with, our children, we spend the most time with, our example, our learning experience is most likely in a codependent setting from a dysfunctional family. And it could even be dysfunctional in the way of like, mom needs to be number one and always the best in a helicopter. And, it can be the opposite. It can be too much. So if that resonates with you, double tap the screen. Let me know. You asked for an example, and I would definitely do it if you gave me just a little bit more information. How is that? And you can tell me too if there's one of these line items or one of these topics that that you want to discuss more than the others. It does seem one-sided, selfish push-pull. Yeah, that I think is where very selfish. Like I work with a lot of couples that don't understand or have empathy for the other, where it's like one person's trying to either point fingers. A lot of times it gets to that, but a lot of times maybe somebody will take the blame, or if the other side is like, okay, I'm right, you're right, I'm right. And it's basically all we're just trying to do is get down to a place where either I win or you win and the other person gives up. That's not communicating. That's not cooperating. That's talking at each other and figuring out at some point you want to bail. Like placating someone. That, again, being honest and vulnerable and saying to somebody, I really have concerns about this and I want you to see me for who I am and what I need. Can you please, work with me on this? Like appealing to them in some ways, not saying your fault, you're the one who has this problem, you need to fix yourself, and I can't deal with it. And somebody's going to drop that and go, you have problems too, blah, blah, blah. So there's a way that I think people with codependency need to learn how to handle their feelings and know that it's okay to be different from their partner and ask their partner to see them as different without that affecting their love for one another. Let's see. My husband thinks that therapy gives people reason for bad behavior. How do I explain that better? Oh, you use the right words. Talk to each other instead of communicate. Yes, light bulb moment. That's it. Instead of, here, will you understand me? Oh, and then asking them to synthesize what you said. Watch that. If you're really interested in this, watch the masterclass. I really go through a lot of the dynamics that I'm not able to hear. And it's free. So, and there's even a template for that level of connection. So, the ideas about therapy that are out there, I mean, two things. We can't necessarily just start to defend therapy with your husband or try to convince him otherwise. How I would deal with him is this. I would say, that's an interesting opinion. Where did you get that from? I will ask him a question. Good, please do. I think you'd really like it. But I would see, this is how codependent people get drawn in to convincing a stubborn, maybe hard-headed person. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe he's going to say, and this is where it's so cool to have the training I do, because I don't ever assume I know something. And it's not my job to convince you of anything. I am really only here to understand you and help you fill in the blank as far as like understanding yourself. When you say, I don't know, or I feel this way and I am not sure where that comes from, but I recognize it here and recognize it there, so I help you put the pieces together. But I ask questions in the best way, and I say this back in my narcissistic videos too. How you do, like noticing that they're getting, like if you start getting in a conversation with somebody more narcissistically inclined and they start to really get defensive, and they notice, I said, I notice that you're getting upset. What's that about? I don't take it personally. But I'm like, if you're not here voluntarily and you're here just, to, again, in a codependent way, to shut her up or to prove that you're right or to, tell me I'm wrong, all that stuff starts to happen. And it's just not effective. It's a waste of everybody's time. So you can tell me a little bit more about if you want to go to therapy or other people, what's going on with your situation, or if that was helpful. Oh, good, Melanie. Absolutely. You're getting so much out of this. 23 years married, still can't communicate. I'm miserable. I will say this, in some ways too, marriages that get to that point, especially nowadays where we're really noticing, I really think a lot of people are wanting to emotionally grow out of kind of the stuck tradition of keep it all in, do it for the family, sacrifice yourself, be miserable, all of those things. People have separate lives. People are like, no, I don't want to have a separate life. This is my spouse, this is my partner. And I notice that I can't communicate with them. But that's when you really have to, Melanie, get that person. And I talked to this guy last night on this coaching call, is like, it cannot be a one-way street. This is a partnership. That person that you're with will need to want to communicate with you too, to connect with you in a new way, to try new things as far as how to experience themselves emotionally. And this is where I think that love comes in. If you've been married to somebody that long, or you've been in a relationship, I try to really ask people, why are you here? Why do you want to work on this? And because it's going to take some time, you're going to have to both put effort into it, and it might be frustrating. But frustration is how we learn. So I think that I really find that people have to dig deep, and the motivation has to be love for the other person. And the desire for that love to, them to want to feel that again, to want to be in the relationship, not to, oh, I'm in one, we've always been here. Oh, well, all of that is just there's other opportunities to live a happy life other than being in a miserable relationship. That's, that if you feel like you're stuck and you just you know what? You can take a year or two to figure something else out and do it. That's what I think. I'm not really interested in, and I don't play games with if I don't find that a relationship is working for two people, then both people need to become stronger emotionally and figure a way to have lives that aren't torturing each other. That's what I think. But if people want to stay in those relationships, I don't know why they're coming to me. But meaning you're either wanting to grow or wanting to go. Can you trust be gained back? 18 years. So was there ever? I want to ask this because I know people with codependency that have been, they don't recognize this, but very early on in life, trust. And yes, please do double tap if you like this. It'll send it out, and share it if you think somebody would be interested in listening now. But if you've ever been abandoned, been told by parents over and over again, we're going to do this, but not that, or I'm going to make change about the situation that you're in this family, and they don't. Thank you for the likes. I totally appreciate that. But if you've been as a child let down chronically, rejected, betrayed, unprotected, you're going to walk into the adult world not recognizing that anything that looks, smells, tastes, you're going to have extrasensory perception around the possibility of this happening. I know a young woman once that started to have a bit of an anxiety attack or a meltdown when the guy that she was dating went to the bathroom too long. He had to go to the bathroom, right? And that was taking him along because it was that type. And he had his phone with him, and she didn't really know him, and she started to panic that he had left and he wasn't coming back and he was doing bad things. And so this is where I say, have you ever had trust? as a codependent woman or man, a lot of times trust was totally betrayed in the beginning. And so we have some real strong trauma responses to kind of normal behavior. Again, somebody is going to the bathroom, maybe they are taking a little long, but it doesn't really call for a reaction like that. So, yes, you can relate, Melrose. Yeah, that is, and that can happen, and you have to be able to. And what we do on this, right? Instead of the coping mechanism being, oh, spiral into fear, and let me see if I can't figure a way to leave this person before they leave me. Instead of facing the feeling and going, wait a second. All of these thoughts and all of these feelings are reminiscent, are showing me that I'm reacting as if the person left or is abandoned. That's not what they've done. And you have to talk yourself back into your body and ground yourself and go, this is what's happening. What's happening is I'm having this reaction and I don't want to go there. I will take a deep breath, reground, become mindful. And when that person comes back, I'll say, you can address the situation. You can't say, well, you took a long time, and just, whatever, say something to your, but at a normal level, not at the, I don't trust because I've been hurt so many times. That is something that we get in a lot of trouble with because people won't understand why they're being treated like an untrustworthy person. So, you want to grow? Yeah, want to grow or go. I love that. I just came up with that too. That was totally spontaneous. You want to grow? You want to go? Yeah, I think that might be the name of my next masterclass. We will be working into relationships on the site. Self-sabotage, intrusive thoughts. Yes, but I think that in knowing that if we don't become objective of the intrusive thought, the thought is a trauma response in some ways. If we don't become objective about those thoughts, they will take us over and definitely, thank you so much, and definitely sabotage our relationships, the things that we want, our jobs. I mean, I've seen people leave jobs because of feeling like, people were, again, not trusting their coworkers. And even if there is some sort of behavior that does seem suspicious, that doesn't mean that you don't, that you just walk away. This is why, again, and we're going to kind of start wrapping up a little bit, is that because, oh my God, yes, triggers my lack of control in situations. Yeah, is that we don't need to, as codependent people, walk around in the world thinking that everything is just a seamless goodness. Like everyone's just on the same page with how good we are and how much effort we put into things, and to see all of that. That in some ways is like a projection. It's okay for somebody to have a negative experience, a different experience, need something else from us, have their own situation or their own opinion. It doesn't mean that anything about us. We need to internalize this and understand that we're solid, we're good, we're worth being there. We don't have to prove anything. We don't need to fix it. We don't need to get it right. Especially for a partner. So we need to really start to work on the emotional learning, obviously, of our childhood and how that's coming across in the relationship. Talk to our partners in ways, and watch that class that help bring them on board in a non-defensive way, and start to talk about the relationship, where you want it to go and what your needs are. It's, or even about topics like, the rest of your life, what you're going to buy, what you're going to save, your kids, things that need discussing together. So you can start to kind of cooperate and coordinate on these levels. If that's not there, folks, you're not in a what I call a real relationship, a relating ship. You're in like two boats and you're chained together. And you gotta like go like this. And that sometimes will leave us in a place that absolutely never get to evolve emotionally. We stay stuck in our growth. So if you keep growing and you keep growing and you find community like we're doing here, this will help you take the next step, the next step, the next step. So I really hope, currently, so helpful. Absolutely. I'm so glad this was helpful. Really, good crew today. I mean, it really, you're following along and you're saying really important things to keep the conversation going. Come back. Tomorrow, I'm going to be talking to Matthew Pfeiffer, who's a coach, big account here on TikTok that helps with narcissistic relationships. He has a way of talking about the stages of relationships that I find very interesting and important for people with codependent issues to start to preconceive of, whether they're in the dating stage or in their end stage or in the mid stage, wherever they are. It's nice to have a framework for conceptualizing where you are and what it's going to take to possibly move yourself into the next stage, mature your love, right? Become better communicators. And then finally, I have a podcast. Everything's on the website. You can even apply to be on the podcast if you want to work with me. Yes, he is incredible. We have such a good time talking, and it will be really educational. 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on my account, and I will see you there most likely. All right, everybody, thank you, and I hope to see you soon.